We will start. Everybody, I have put MJ's, Jonathan said there's no one else in his living room with him watching, which is good. And Spencer, we're going to do the countdown 5, 4, 3. Now Spencer can record. Welcome everybody. What we're doing right now is in the chat, there's a link to MJ's bio. You're also going to tell us where you're from, where you're located right now, and who's in the room with you. The location with the greatest number of people gets a prize. My name is Deborah Kiak-Franson. I'm the Associate Vice President for Digital Education and Engagement at the University of Colorado System Office, which I can say in one breath. And it's my pleasure to, first of all, to thank Spencer over at CDHE for being the tech meister for this Zoom call. I'd like to welcome you all to CU's contribution to Open Education Week, and to wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. And also to welcome MJ Bishop. For those of you who are clicking on MJ's bio, which I'll put the link in again, for those of you who are tuning in now, she directs the University of System Maryland's Kirwan Center for Academic Innovation. She has a PhD in instructional
design and technology.
Thank you. But most of all, MJ is, and she's been warned that I will say this, an absolute rock star. I've watched MJ at work for the past 5 years, and she is absolutely remarkable. I've seen her really push forward an OER initiative all across Maryland, pushed for greater adoption of student success practices, again, across the entire state, but also at the national level. So I want you to know how lucky we are to have MJ here, because she is truly a national leader. This was emphasized for me yesterday when I watched you, yesterday and the day before when I watched you in action at the Gates Foundation meeting. MJ knows everybody. She can connect people like nobody else. And and I'm just so excited to learn from you, as I'm sure everyone is. Everybody, just if you could stick to chat and ask questions after every bit of MJ's presentation. We're going to stop. I'm going to curate questions, and I'm going to pepper them at MJ. And yes, Auraria is winning with 6 people. Not that we're competitive at all. And so, MJ, I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself, and then turn it over to you. So thank you so much for being here.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Deb, for that introduction. Wow. So I'm going to have to take my cold hands and put them on my cheeks to stop blushing. It's very nice of you. So yeah, I direct the William E. Kirwan Center for Academic Innovation at the University System of Maryland. Another thing you have to learn how to say very quickly, or take a deep breath before you start that whole long string of a title. But as Deb said, prior to that, actually, I was at Lehigh University. I taught there as a faculty member in the College of Education for 13 years. It's hard for me to believe at this point that it's been, actually I was thinking about it this morning, it's been 7 years since I actually was teaching. I went on sabbatical the spring of 2013 and ran across this absolutely amazing job, and kind of haven't looked back since. It's been a wild ride and an opportunity to take everything that I was researching around, the role that technology should be playing in teaching and learning, and thinking hard about the intersection of that with what's happening in higher education today. So I haven't really looked back. I had this, let me start sharing my slides. Sorry, I jumped right into that without remembering there was a little technology piece I needed to deal with here. So let's see if this works. You guys see the slides?
Yep, we do.
Great, thank you, Deb. Maryland is kind of an interesting place to be doing this academic innovation work. I'm not sure how familiar you are with us. It's been called kind of America in miniature, in that we have we're small enough to allow day travel to meetings, which often cluster there around where that number 15 and the star is, which is where our offices are. But we've got a real diverse set of environments and a real diversity of things that are going on in the state. Obviously, close proximity to the nation's capital, but out there on the left in the Western Panhandle are mountains, to the extent we have mountains here in Pennsylvania or in Maryland on the East Coast. On the east side, of course, we've got the ocean and kind of everything in between, right, in terms of urban and suburban environments and so forth. And our higher education institutions here in the system really reflect that diversity, I would argue. We've got 3 HBCUs, we've got research-intensive institutions, University of Maryland, University College, which is listed there under number 11, is a fully online institution. And of course, we have a couple of regional centers as well. So it's a great and really interesting place to do this academic innovation work, because I get a chance to work with essentially a microcosm of higher education, if you will. So just to give you a little sense of that. The other thing, though, I was really fortunate to have was this opportunity to kind of build on the shoulders of giants. The Kirwan Center is named after our former Chancellor, William E. Kirwan, Britt Kirwan, as he is commonly known. And his legacy, I think, in the system was, in the 12 years that he was here, was just a whole lot of leadership around finding ways as a system that we can address the collectively address the pressures on higher education, and really think hard about how we serve the populations that need the opportunity to advance through higher education. That's been Britt's mantra for many, many years. And he was really key in starting in 2006 a course redesign initiative that emanated out of the system office, which really kind of marked the first time, at least here in Maryland, and I think it's true for many state systems, that the state system became something more than just the entity that was keeping the lights on and the trains running on time, but rather became something of a coordinating and proactive effort to affect and support change across the institutions in the state. So the Kirwan Center's mission, as the slide says, is to take what we're learning from the learning sciences and understand the capabilities of emerging technologies and find ways to combine those things in ways that will increase access, affordability, and achievement for students. And that really has become that, the alliteration there is on purpose. I was an English major. That, we really continue to think about how do we do those 3 things simultaneously, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And then, of course, to identify best practice and help the institutions scale and sustain them over time. So if you are noticing, so far I've not actually even said the word OER or used the phrase open educational resources. OER is not in my mission statement. It is one of the many arrows in my quiver, if you will, that we use to help lead this conversation around the things that we can be doing across the system in order to achieve some of these goals. And given my background, you're going to notice too, as we talk a little bit further, that I tend to view the instructional design background, I tend to view the challenges we face in higher education very much from that lens. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So enough on me and kind of where I'm coming from, just to give you a sense of things. But let's go ahead and jump into the first part. And as Deb said, we're going to pause here in a few minutes and take some questions. But I know we've probably got a variety of folks on the call, and that there are going to be some folks that understand a little bit more about what we're talking about than others. There is absolutely not enough time for us to get in depth on this OER 101 question, what the heck is all this stuff? But at least hopefully this will give you enough grounding so the rest of what we're going to talk about here will help to make some sense for you. So first of all, I think just by fact that you're on the call, I suspect many of you are familiar with some of these data. You know, the College Board is telling us that tuition accounts for only 39% of the overall cost of attending college at four-year public institutions and 20% of attending at two-year public institutions. And if you unpack this slide a little bit, what you notice is that, you know, room and board is accounting for most of the costs, of course, but there are these other living expenses and books and supplies and all of these things that are contributing to the growing debt balances that our students have. So, you know, and in particular, focusing at least on the four-year institutions for a moment, you know, the tuition and room and board amounts to, on average, around $20,000 at our four-year public institutions. But the issue is that everything to the right of that, so the red, or the pink and the yellow and the green, those are things that often come as a bit of a surprise to many of our students. We do our best to try to make them aware of these things, but that roughly around $4,500 is the kind of thing that we pile on to our students afterwards that they may not necessarily have been thinking about. And that $1,250 amount is the thing that, as of course many of you are aware, has been just rising exponentially over the last many years. So you've probably seen the statistic that that the price of textbooks has increased 812% since 1978, and just in the last 10 years or so, 63%. So, you know, we've got students that are being asked to pay somewhere between $1,200 and $1,250 per year on average for required textbooks. And again, that is an average. The range is much broader. And particularly when we take a look at the STEM fields and the places where we're trying to attract first-gen students, underrepresented minorities, and so forth, you know, those are the places where the textbooks tend to be even more pricey. The consequences for our students, unfortunately, is that we end up with an awful lot of students who at some point make the decision, 65%, they make the decision to not purchase a college textbook due to its high price. And in this case, 48%, and I want to just, this is the Public Interest Research Group data coming from them, US PIRG. 48% they found factored in textbook costs when deciding how many or which classes to take. So that means if students are taking a lighter load, it's taking them longer to get through their college degree programs, which also adds costs to their education. And the other thing that we're finding is that those who are able to purchase textbooks often do so using their financial aid dollars. 30% who replied to the 2016 survey that was conducted by the Student Public Interest Research Group, or Student PIRG, reported that they must use financial aid to pay for their textbooks, and estimated, and that financial aid expenditure is estimated to be nearly 3 billion financial aid dollars that are being spent just on textbooks alone that might instead be getting used to reduce other higher education costs. And of course, the other problem with this is that financial aid refunds often come 2 or 3 weeks into the semester. What we end up with, unfortunately, are students who are waiting to purchase their textbooks and finding themselves to be 2 or 3 weeks behind in their course materials once they're able to do so. So drilling down to what's happening specifically in Maryland, Maryland 2-year and 4-year public higher education students are spending over $223 million annually on textbooks, which is on average coming out to be between $120 and $150 per student per course. Interestingly, in Maryland, our community college tuition and fees per credit is $142. So you can see that, particularly in the community colleges, this is making up a huge percentage of their costs of attending our institutions. And you know, there's still much work to be done, with 33 1/3% of Maryland public higher ed students receiving Pell Grants. Unfortunately, the need is considerable for many of the students that we're serving here. So OER, Open Educational Resources, promises to be something that can help us deal with this issue. So real quickly, OERs are teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. So what we mean by this is that Anyone using these materials can retain them, make, own, and control their own copy. They can reuse them, use the content in its unaltered form, or if they choose to do so, depending on the license, they can also revise them. They can adapt, adjust, modify, improve, or alter the content. They can remix, combining with other things, and they are at liberty to redistribute them. These 5 things need to be in place in order for a resource to be considered to be OER, an open educational resource. And typically, these resources are licensed under something called a Creative Commons license. And this is where I'm not going to have a lot of time to get into a whole lot of detail on this. But what Creative Commons licenses allows for, it's a public copyright license that enables the free distribution of an otherwise copyrighted work. And by free, we mean more than just money here. Free meaning that we can freely use it, freely share it, freely revise, remix, reuse, as I just showed you a little bit ago. And these Creative Commons licenses come in a variety of flavors, if you will. So this first one, which is the most open version of a Creative Commons license, is just simply, I've created something, I'm putting it out there, and all I'm asking you to do, if you're going to use it, is to give me attribution. So it's called a CC BY, BY, not BUY, BY license. And then as you get further down this continuum, and these things do actually create a continuum, each of these licenses starts to create a more restricted category of use. So in this case, and these things are all available on Wikipedia, by the way, so if you're interested in unpacking this a little bit more, and of course the Creative Commons website is fabulous for explaining a lot of this work. But at the very top of this, what we have of this continuum, what we have with the 0 and the cross through it, is public domain. So, you know, clearly at the very top of this, we're talking about public domain. But the CC BY license, then the CC BY share alike says, okay, you can use my material as long as you give me attribution, but then you must, if you're going to reuse it, you must, and change things, you need to share that under the same kind of a license as mine. And as you move further down this continuum, the NC license, just go back here for a sec, non-commercial, I say that, yes, you may, you have to give me attribution, you have to share alike, but in addition to that, you can do anything except use it for commercial purposes. And then as you continue down, you can use it except you can't make any derivative works from my version. So interestingly, that one actually restricts even you from translating it into a different language or something along those lines. So when you talk to folks about OER in particular, they argue that everything within the green area here, so both the dark green and the lighter green, that's the space where we're really focusing on with OER. These are the things that are truly openly licensed and available for others to reuse fairly quickly. So that was, oh my gosh, a way too fast overview of OER, but I'll pause here for a minute, Deb, and see if we have any questions that we can answer quickly with respect to that.
And there's just one, MJ, and it's from the CDHE group that recently heard that the figure for books and supplies has been or is being refuted. Is there updated information later than 2010? And Jonathan, if you can put in the chat when remember we had ours when we did that first one-pager to the legislature, if you could put in what years those were from and whether that line, that slope has changed at all.
Mm-hmm. I suspect it probably has, which is a good thing. You know, to some degree, it means that we're winning the battles here, and the textbook publishers are bringing their costs down, or their prices down, I should say. You know, I know that the College Board has stuck pretty firmly to the $1,250 figure for the last couple of years. It's a good question, though. Thank you for that. I probably ought to go back and take another look and see if there are figures. We do have figures beyond 2010, for sure. Okay. I think the last one I saw was 2017 that still had us at about $1,250. But there may be an update now for 2018.
And MJ, I'm going to impose on your time just a little bit.
Sure.
We've got a little back channel. I'm really willing to be convinced that everybody turning on their video is a good thing, that it's more interactive. So I've gotten responses back from 2 people that say yes. And so if you want to turn on your video, turn on that video. And Jonathan said he's seen graphs that show a recent dip, but he doesn't know where they are. He will be looking.
Thank
so,
you.
Yeah, so if people want to turn on their video.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben. There we go.
Yay. Faces. Actually, that does help.
Okay, good.
You know, I deliberately took some of the jokes out of my presentation because it's so hard to do a joke and then have absolutely nobody laugh. You know, I mean, it's more devastating that way, you know, even if you're assuming people are laughing, but yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people don't have video access, but those that do, could you please turn it on and laugh at MJ's jokes?
Just go like this.
All right, that's great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Back over to you, MJ.
All right. Thank you. I do feel like I'm on a radio show or something. This is great. Oh, wait a minute. It's not going to advance. Oh, wait, there we go. Okay. So, yeah, actually, thank you for the questions about, I need to update the data because I do suspect we're seeing a dip in the last year or so. But part of the reason I kind of went ahead through that part of the presentation too and presented some of those data up front is that this is the way we've been presenting OER. This is the case we've been making from the beginning with respect to OER. But I've been arguing lately that I think we need to shift the conversation a little bit. And that's sort of what this next segment is going to be about. And with the first question being, you know, is this all really going to be sustainable? So this is a puppy. And many of you may have heard the joke that OER is free like a puppy. Everybody can laugh at the, you know, so the idea being that, yeah, I know, Jonathan, I've seen your stuff. We can talk about that. And you and I agree, by the way. We're coming to realize the care and feeding of this puppy, this OER puppy, and this actually is my dog, Cooper. Cooper was not free even to begin with, but he has become very expensive since we first got him. And the reason for that, of course, is that there's this care and feeding and maintaining of the puppy that we need to think about as we're thinking about adoptions of OERs. And as we know, our institutions are increasingly resource strapped. You know, this is not something, as we incur the costs that had previously been covered by students paying for textbooks, we've got to figure out as higher ed institutions how we're going to manage this and how we're going to make sure that we're ADA compliant, that we've vetted these materials for digital rights compliance, that they're up to date, that they you know, that the links don't break. All these kinds of things take resources that right now, at least if we were to tomorrow turn the switch and have everybody switch over to OER, we're not currently set up to be able to maintain this. And that's, to me, Jonathan, the free as a puppy part, and we can talk later. I love the dragon egg thing. I think that's cool. But you know, the point being that these things are going to cost our institutions money. And there are some of us in the higher ed community across some of the state systems. I've been working with SUNY and CUNY, where we're trying to figure out what exactly that cost is going to be. And we're not sure yet, you know, but let's just, for the sake of argument today, say that it comes down to around $25 per student per course, just for the sake of argument. What happens when the publishers finally get to the place where they're able to bring their offerings down to about that same level? And we know you're seeing all of these Inside Higher Ed and Chronicle articles. You know, the publishers are working harder and harder and harder to bring down those textbook costs, as we're seeing and likely to see also in that graph that I showed earlier today. What happens when they get it down to $25, or even more so, what happens when they get it down to less than $25 per student per course, if that turns out to be what we realize it's costing us? And you've got that faculty member who had already, you know, switched over to OER and now is faced with having to redo some materials. And McGraw-Hill walks in and says, I've got your solution. It's less than even what it's costing your institution. What is that faculty member likely to do 9 times out of 10? What is the value of OER? at that point? What is the value proposition here? Is it something more than just the free part? And have we been making a mistake by only focusing on that one aspect of what open educational resources can do for us? And I want to just take a minute, and this is the instructional design part of my presentation, to talk a little bit more about something that's very important as an instructional designer to this answering this question, which is, what do we know about the tools? How often do we really dig into what we would call the affordances of the tools to help us understand what actions the new tools make possible as a result? So affordances are things like this. You know, these switches. The light switch affords flipping, the buttons afford pushing, the knob affords twisting, all without there having to be any instructions there. We can tell by the way the tool is designed what actions it affords and makes possible for us. And you see these things all around you. You know, these waste paper baskets all suggest the ways in which you're supposed to interact with them. You can't put the bottle in the paper slit because it just won't fit. Donald Norman, who was a huge advocate of this concept of affordances, there's a great book by him called The Design of Everyday Things, had this on his cover. So, you know, there are times in which the affordances of a tool can actually prohibit and hinder particular actions that we're trying to do. Much like this is not a particularly conducive room for teaching a flipped classroom or an active, you know, activity-based kind of pedagogy. So in addition to knowing the affordances, then we begin to talk about how do we use the tools and what are the things that we do with them and how do we use the tools in a way that it helps to transform the way we do business. So this is a concept called functional fixedness, and actually an experiment that was done way back in the 1930s by a guy named Mayer. If there are any psychologists on the call, they probably will know the answer to this question, but this was called the two-string problem. So participants were required to figure out a way to tie two strings together, even though when holding onto one of the strings, they couldn't reach the other one. And in the room, there was a variety of objects on the desk, including a pair of pliers. So what most people did, of course, was they took that pair of pliers and they used it to try to extend their reach, right? So they used the grabber and they tried to extend their reach in the other direction. But as it turned out, the string was still out of reach. So the solution to the problem, if anybody's guessing it, was to think differently about the rest of the affordances of that pair of pliers, like its weight. So the solution was to tie the pliers to the string, swing it like a pendulum, and then you could eventually catch that other string. So thinking about the tool and the affordances of the tool in a very different way than had been, you know, than we previously or typically would use a pair of pliers. This idea is, I think, really illustrated in this, and the way in which this affects educators, I think, is really illustrated by this photograph from the 1920s. It's a little easier than on the screen to see it than you can often when I project it in a room. But can you tell what you're looking at here? I mean, at first blush, it's a fairly typical classroom environment, right? Kids are sitting at their desks. They're all, well, not all of them, but many of them are paying close attention to their teacher, who is pointing at a globe and standing in front of a chalkboard under a clock. But as you can see in the text that's there above her head, this was actually a very unique opportunity in the 20s in a school district in Los Angeles for students to experience geography firsthand from a plane. But what have they done? They took the plane and replicated a classroom inside of it. They kind of forgot that the plane had wings. That was one of the affordances that they skipped over. The kids aren't even looking at the windows, right? They used the tool to simply replicate essentially what they had always done in the past with respect to a classroom environment. So one more exercise on this. Let's apply this idea to our recent experience with MOOCs. Thinking about MOOCs like that pair of pliers or that airplane, what is the one affordance that we maybe have failed to really capitalize on? I'd argue clearly not the course. We were doing online before. You know, there's this whole conversation about whether MOOCs are really open or not. I think we missed out on the massiveness piece. And if any of you follow George Siemens and Stephen Downes, they have been envisioning the massiveness piece as something very different than just scale, which is the way we've looked at massiveness. They've divided the M part of a MOOC between an X MOOC and a C MOOC. The X MOOC is sort of what we've typically done with MOOCs, where you know, we present a concept, let's say, for example, in a typical MOOC environment, we use that scale part to increase access to learning about core skills and concepts and maybe do some light application. Then they've suggested, then let's bring people together in face-to-face environments where a teacher can help them guide them through authentic project-based applications and doing things with the skills that were introduced in the X MOOC. But then the part that I think is really cool and where the affordance can be used to do things differently is the C MOOC part, where we come back into the MOOC environment and we say, let's bring folks together to do things like crowdsourcing solutions to wicked problems and building community around doing. That's a really interesting use of that affordance that is something that many of us who have interacted with MOOCs and been doing this have missed out on. All right, so bring it back to OER. How are we doing with OER? Well, as I said before, we've focused so much on the free part that I fear that we've lost track of the open part. Just like the massiveness of MOOCs was going to scale education, make it affordable, the freeness of OER has been the thing that everybody has jumped all over. And while that has been great, and we've made huge strides in saving students money, I fear, as I said before, that eventually the value proposition on the affordability part is going to go away. Now, don't get me wrong, we love free. I use free all the time. I use free when I'm talking to our legislators. We even ended up with a Jeopardy question. This was University of Maryland, University College, they got rid of course materials, are now online and free. So, we got some interesting press in that respect. But at the end of the day, we've got to refocus our attention on this part of this, that open is not just free. That in fact, open actually allows us to do things as teachers that have not been possible in the past. And where I'm going with this is if we start to think about student success and what it takes for students to achieve, and again, getting back to the Kirwan Center's mission statement, for me, it's about increasing access, affordability, and achievement simultaneously. The problem here is that, at least in the past, these three things have formed something of an iron triangle, right? So in order for us to increase access, often we've had to increase costs. Or in order to increase achievement, we reduce access and increase costs. So these things have tended in the past for higher education, for any education, to have a reciprocal relationship that makes it very difficult to increase all three simultaneously. But lately, I've come to think of OER and the possibilities of openness as sort of the uber affordance that in fact can help us do all three of these things simultaneously. So OER has really helped us, obviously, in terms of the access and affordability. But when we couple those materials with the data that we need in order to understand what's working and what's not working for our students, we suddenly have opened up a whole area here where we can actually engage in, dare I say it, continuous quality improvement. Where in fact and this is the ADDIE model instructional designers use, where we begin by analyzing the need for learning, we design the environment, we develop it, implement it, and then we go back, evaluate it, and then rinse and repeat, right? So once we've evaluated, we go in and make our changes and so forth. And this is really, this doesn't even really describe the things that can be happening formatively as we're teaching a course. But because of the affordances of open, we're now in a situation where we can actually engage, in addition to the free part and saving students money, we can really engage in a continuous quality improvement loop that can help us with that achievement part in a big way as well. Now, just real quickly, and then we'll turn over to questions, Deb. I don't want to dismiss all the great work that's going on in open pedagogy. I think that's also absolutely amazing. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that when students have access day one to course materials, that also helps achievement. But this is a thing that I think we've been missing in the conversations around OER, and the opportunity that we have that, to me at least, there's some urgency around, because I do think when McGraw-Hill and all these other guys come back and eliminate the value proposition of the free part, it's going to be very difficult, at least from the state system perspective, to encourage faculty, administrators, legislators to invest and engage in this OER discussion in the way that they are currently. So I'll stop there, pause there for a minute, and we can do a little Q&A if you'd like, Deb.
Yeah, so there's one question, and I encourage other people to just keep chatting about this. The one comment we have is the affordances of open is an incredibly elegant phrase. So thank you for that. And from Emily, who's down at MSU, is there an example to help us understand how OER improves the ADDIE cycle?
Yeah, not yet, but we're working on it. That's my entree into the next part of my talk. So if that's it, I'll keep pressing on. And then...
actually, there's just one other question that just came in. And so most people like the free aspect. This is from Spencer and the CDHE folks. Some people may not like the open aspect. How might we approach the conversation with these people?
Yeah, and in fact, so Deb knows I was at Virginia Tech earlier this week, helping them kick off their Open Ed Week, and you know, there's what we're doing on the open education side, and then also what's happening on the open scholarship side. So open access, open data. You know, there's, in my mind, after having had that experience being there I was there almost 2 days. I talked to an awful lot of people on campus while I was there. I think there seems to be a little bit of a continuum also in terms of, if this is the scholarship side and this is the OER side or the open education side, there's a continuum of fear involved here for faculty. You know, when we start messing with their scholarship and their data, understandably, they're really worried about, what is this going to mean for my promotion and tenure? Open access journals aren't as well respected. You know, this is my data, and, you know, I paid for it, you know, all those kinds of things on this side. And we also see it to some degree on the OER side with respect to things like publishing textbooks and those kinds of things. I think resolving that on all aspects of this is going to take a whole shift in mindset around what we value in higher education, what faculty are being rewarded for. Deb, these are the places where we're trying to, you know, exert some influence from the system level around policy and things along those lines. I think we're going to have conversations with our disciplinary societies. I think, you know, that this is going to take a lot of work, not just within institutions, but across institutions and across systems in order to help drive these kinds of conversations. What I suggested at Virginia Tech, given they're so research intensive, was that I think getting the foot in the door on the open education side is going to be an easier proposition as we move forward, and as people begin to become more exposed to what this means, and how it is that, you know, education should be about sharing. If you've never seen David Wiley's Education is Sharing TEDx talk, I encourage you to Google it. He's much more articulate about that than I am. I think we'll begin to shift the tide, but we are going to, you know, there's some understandable faculty concern about what this means for their promotion and tenure, their future in the academy, and so forth, that we're going to have to address together. If we value this, you know, that's the other thing. Do we value this? Is this continuous quality improvement loop something that we see that can, in fact, make a difference for our student achievement?
Great.
All right, so I'll continue to talk a little bit about the Maryland example now. I'm not here to tell you we've got this all figured out. I'm here to tell you that we're just beginning to head down this road and working to start small and build infrastructure. So when I first started in this job in 2013, one of the very first people that came on knocking at my door was the then USM Student Council president. And he said to me, we want to make textbook affordability our big project this year, and we're hoping the Kerwin Center might partner with us. And at that point, I was staring at a blank sheet of paper, not having any idea whatsoever what this meant to be in this job or how I was going to go about it. And I thought, yay, okay, great. I get to work with students, and this seems to be a really worthwhile thing. The student council president then said, and I have two other things. These are, the conditions on which we want to partner. He said, first of all, we're going to engage all the community colleges. I said, that's great. Community colleges aren't part of the system. This is a huge opportunity for us to talk about transfer pathways and smooth those over by sharing instructional materials and kind of eliminating that argument about, oh, you didn't use the textbook I use in my course, so that course can't transfer to my institution. So working to smooth those transfer pathways and to increase conversations around learning outcomes and the things that help to do that. So that's great. Okay, what else do you have? Second requirement was we're going to take a bill to Annapolis, and we're going to require all faculty to adopt OER in the next 3 years. This is where you go. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Emily. Emily's laughing. Thank you. Yeah, I thought, oh, okay, well, that's not working in other places, and we don't operate that way out of the system office. Instead, let's take a look at the ways in which we can capitalize on that good course redesign work that had already been going on. And I said, I just really think there are an awful lot of faculty who are concerned about this. And if they're not, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to guess it's because they're not aware. They're not aware of not only what textbooks are costing, but in addition, what a hardship that is becoming for our students. So the students actually named it the Maryland Open Source Textbook Initiative, MOST. And up until about last fall, 2018, we'd supported 89 courses across 19 institutions. As I said, we're saving around $141 per course on average. Our cumulative savings is actually up over $4 million now. I need to update this slide. And that's not with UMUC, the online institution that went entirely to OER. They're averaging $20 million per year. They have like 90,000 students. So I don't feel like I can take credit for that one, so we leave that out. Last fall, most OER mini grants saved 6,500 students, 1.2 million. So we're now ramping up our mini grant program and finding per semester, these numbers are going to start going up pretty quickly in the neighborhood of 1 to 1.5 million each semester. And of course, those numbers add up really quickly, and this is the kind of thing that really gets the legislators' attention. So please don't misunderstand me. I think there are arguments you make with certain audiences about OER and the benefits of them, and this is the one that really seems to get the legislators' attention, as you can imagine. So in fact, in 2017, the legislature charged the Kerwin Center and the MOST initiative to work with all the public higher ed institutions. We got openly licensed and fully accessible in the bill. So, this is not about affordability, which isn't to say I'm not open to other ways in which we can create affordable options for students, like capitalizing on our library subscriptions to utilize those kinds of things as well. But the bill itself and the focus of the MOST initiative is openly licensed, fully accessible materials. They required us to take a look at the K-12 possibilities as well. So we have been working with MSDE, the Maryland K-12 group that, and obviously the overlap there is going to be more in secondary, but we're looking at that as well. And we got a whopping $100,000 of appropriation to manage all of this for the next however many years they thought I was going to be able to live on that. About a week after I got this news, and it was big news because the governor really never adds money to the budget after the legislative session, but in this case they did, and this was all unanimously approved by the legislature. But about a week after that, I got the news that SUNY and CUNY had gotten their first infusion of $8 million from Governor Cuomo. So it was sort of short-lived, and no sour grapes. They've been great collaborators with us on the work that we're doing at the state and system level. And here's a picture of the bill signing. Again, this is where you laugh. As you can see, the governor's there in the middle, looking rather irritated. I'm hoping someday I'll get a chance to retake my picture with the governor when, in fact, he says now he's going to give us $8 million. In his defense, it was a very warm day, and there were about 900 bills that he was signing, and it had dragged on for quite some time. In fact, he's saying at this point, "Can we move this along?" So anyway, I'm hopeful that I'll get a chance to take another picture with the governor at some point. But we have gotten an infusion of support in the last year from the Hewlett Foundation. And what Hewlett is funding us to do is exactly what I talked about earlier. In fact, when I went to Hewlett, I said to them, I'm not going to come back to you again. We're either going to make this sustainable, we're either going to figure this out within our own institutions and across the system, or we're not. But I could use some help to stand this up. So what Hewlett has funded us to do is exactly what I was talking about earlier, to look at what is possible with OER in terms of not just the number of students we're impacting, not just the cost savings, but also the learning gains. What can we be doing differently that would allow us to capitalize on that openness part of OER to impact student achievement? So we've just recently written up our mission statement, Deb. I'm happy to share this with you as well, and our vision statement. But we are very clearly in it now to support this long-term statewide scaling. We really are dedicated, as the second sentence says, to empowering and rewarding faculty who capitalize on these opportunities in order to optimize student learning through continuous quality improvement. And everything now that we're doing is aimed at that. So we're trying to build, unlike SUNY and CUNY, and if Mark McBride or Ann Fiddler were on the call, they would second me here on this. It's been great for them to have the infusion of cash, but unfortunately, it's all been scale, 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 scale for them, and they've not had the time to slow down and say, all right, well, how do we create the infrastructure to make this possible? How do we keep from having to replicate what publishers have always done in the past in order to make this work? How do we create efficiencies by collaborating across institutions? One of the things that we're exploring is looking at getting all the libraries talking to each other so that you don't have, what do we have, 28 community colleges and four-year institutions, 28 libraries that are all curating course materials for psychology. Can we have a conversation and say, okay, you do psychology, we're going to do chemistry, they're going to do biology, so on and so forth. How can we work together on creating this infrastructure that can really support the work and support the faculty who are interested in engaging in this work? So the big goal is three-part: to shift this conversation from being just about affordability to being about student success. If the value proposition isn't there for student success, then frankly, I don't care. Supporting effective and efficient adoption, creation, and adaptation of OER to optimize that student achievement piece in addition to the access and the affordability. And developing processes, models, and reward structures for sustaining the work over time. So there I'm talking about, how do we, in addition to working at the policy level for promotion and tenure, but how do we also, and also talking to the disciplinary societies, but how do we also create a review cycle for OERs? And internally, as almost like our scholarly review system, a system for OERs that would allow us to, in a much better way, quantify that kind of contribution back to teaching in a way that SOTL has been doing an awful lot of work in this respect, but it's all through publications, right? Here, if we can create a review system that would allow Jonathan to review the OER that I just created, and for me to be able to report that back on my dossier, and for me to have access to the analytics that say, Jonathan used it in his course, Deb used it in hers, Emily used it in hers. These OERs are impacting lots and lots of students. That's exactly mirrors what we do for our scholarly publications as well. So giving us more quantifiable ways to demonstrate the ways in which we're contributing back on the teaching side of things. So this is an early stab at the kinds of things that we're hoping to do at a central level out of Maryland to support this work. Kind of in three broad categories right now: the training and support, the OER content and tools, and the evaluation piece. We're already doing a lot with workshops and networking. We're going to be working with the institutions to think about their own sustainability models, how libraries get involved, so on and so forth. That middle portion, we are working, in fact, we've partnered with OER Commons on building a microsite. And, I'm calling it a referatory. Not a repository. This is a place where I'm hoping we're going to be able to do collaborations around developing OER, curating OER, but also that critical piece, as I said before, if Allegheny Community College wants to know what Frostburg, their feeder school, is using for a particular course, they can go into the course hub, see what's getting used, find the person they need to contact to have a conversation, and so forth. So creating that networking space as well, both within the system and hopefully eventually outside the system. And then the really critical piece is that evaluation piece on the right side. My associate director is actually working on her dissertation, which is going to be all about taking a look at the extent to which faculty are really using OER to change the way they're doing things as compared to just swapping out the textbook for open educational resources, which isn't a bad thing. It's reducing costs. But are we yet really beginning to think about the things that OER make possible in addition to that? And of course, doing a much better job in terms of thinking about assessing and understanding, evaluating the student achievement piece as well. Okay, I think I got through it, Deb, and there's still time left. I can't believe it.
There is, and I am just now, I've got a whole bunch of questions that I have, and I'm trying to, that I've been taking notes about, and I'm hoping other people will chime in. Deb, if
you didn't write them in the chat, you're not allowed to ask them.
If I didn't write them in the chat?
Yeah, you told everybody else they had to write them in the chat.
I did. Look at it. Okay. Got it. I'm doing it right now. So the first question we have actually isn't from me, but it is from the folks at CDHE. What successes have you had with inter-institutional collaboration? How do you foster this in your system and beyond, which goes to my question E, Dewar and Colorado.
All right, thank you for that. The mini grant program encourages collaborations, and we've seen that begin, and it's starting to really take hold because particularly actually so far in mathematics, because we've had a really strong mathematics reform initiative here in the state over the last several years, partially once again because Britt was a math guy. What we're seeing, because the math faculty are already getting together to talk about developmental pathways and trying to break down barriers there, we're seeing a lot of the math folks start to talk to one another. So that work began with them coming to agreement around learning outcomes for not just developmental but also gen ed courses in mathematics, and then it continued into this discussion about the open educational resources and the materials that they're using in their courses. So that's been the first thing to take hold, but we're starting to see more and more conversations too around the rest of the gen ed requirements. And Deb, this is the kind of thing we can capitalize from the system level. I don't know how it is in Colorado, but our COMAR, the Code of Maryland, is pretty clear about gen ed and the kinds of things, and the fact in Maryland that those courses have to transfer from the 2-year to 4-year institutions. So there's already kind of the ground is fertile there for that kind of a conversation to happen, and that's where we're seeing it start to take off in Maryland so far. And I'm hopeful again that when we create this OER Commons mini site, that will also begin to spark some additional discussions. So, somebody out on the Eastern Shore in Salisbury wants to do something for an advanced art history course or something, and the only other course like it being taught is in Frostburg. These folks now have a platform to begin that conversation.
That's great. And just so you know, for the Colorado legislation, there was an emphasis on gen ed courses, on those courses, the GT Pathways courses.
Yeah.
And I think we have to kind of circle back, because we saw a lot of but a lot of suggestions that people should be developing OER for courses, and a lot of different campuses chose the same courses. And so we were able, after the fact, to pull them together. But yeah, that's great. Tell me a little bit more. Actually, yeah, Spencer, I see a private message from Spencer. Yeah, if you could mention that, the doers, and mention that MJ, and right now, that would be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, except for I was going to print out the document. I can remember.
No, that's okay. Spencer can jump in.
Yeah, doers. What does doers stand for again? OERs, I know. So it's designing. What's the D, Spencer?
You got me on that one. I'm not sure.
Delightful.
Yeah, delightful.
Developing, or
yeah. Let's say it's developing. OERs for student success and scalability. I know that with the 3 S's are 4. So doers is actually, so again, I started working with SUNY and CUNY shortly after they got all their money, and Mark McBride called me and said, so we got all this money and now we're trying to figure out what to do with it. You seem to have it all going on. And I thought, wait, I said, what, Mark? I thought I was chasing SUNY all along in this work. But we've been meeting now, now probably 2 or 3 times a year for the last couple of years, and really sharing ideas and notes, and understanding the differences between our systems and the similarities, and realizing that there are a lot of statewide initiatives underway. Some are system-led, some are not, but all of which could benefit from this conversation. But even more importantly, the muscle that we can put behind the rest of this OER work collectively with respect to the things that we should be doing, the academy should own, the higher ed institutions should own. So again, that disciplinary conversation, that's on us. That's, we can't expect the US and Student Pergs and Spark and all these other organizations to go and sit down with all the mathematicians and say, we need to have a conversation. That's on us. The other thing too that we're excited about with respect to the leverage that we might have is to work a little more closely with the providers, the vendors, on helping them understand what our needs are at this point. From my perspective, what I'd really like, if this continuous quality improvement loop's really going to work, I'd love to see some vendors that give us a lot more local control over making changes to these materials, making the authoring tools easier, giving us the data we need to know that chapter 4 is not working with my students. All those learning analytics instead of the learner analytics, the learning analytics at a micro level that help me understand what's happening in my course. If we work collectively across these statewide initiatives and help them understand that's what we want, we don't necessarily need some access to some of these other things you're providing. We're hopeful that doers can help to have some influence in those ways. Did I get what you wanted me to cover, Spencer? Good. So I'm hopeful that Colorado will join us. We've just had our 3 chancellors sign off on the document, and we've been shopping it around to all the other statewide initiatives. And I think we're going to try to do something in July, a meeting, Deb, just so you know.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Keep us
posted
because
you're in.
Yeah.
All
Go
right.
ahead, Deb.
No, you go, Spencer.
We brought the idea, the concept to the last OER council meeting, and we had essentially a vote of confidence in the idea. And so I think we have some support from our steering group, our statewide steering group here.
Excellent.
So we're excited about it.
Excellent.
And Emily, could you come off mute and ask your questions, please?
So what I wrote in the chat was that I think publishers are already trying to emphasize student success when they talk to faculty, and especially through adaptive homework systems. So my question was, how do we address that? And how about creating an open source system that helps with the learner analytics that you're talking about?
Yeah. That latter part is what we're talking to the providers about. Sorry, I'm looking this way because your image is actually over there on my screen. Yeah, that's part of what we're actually talking to the providers about, is to create that open source environment where we can make that possible. Did I just mess up the share? No, I'll stop share here. Where we can actually make that possible, the open tools, and separate the platform from the content, I would argue. And your first question again was, I distracted myself with the technology.
Oh, I think I think they're linked. Just how do we address more of the software side that the publishers are providing?
Well, and also you'd ask the question about, you know, that they're also starting to zero in on the student success piece, but I would argue as long as those materials are copyrighted in a way that doesn't allow the 5 R's, we're not really going to have any control over making substantive changes to those things. Now, you know, again, I'm open. And I had a conversation just the other day with Cengage. You know, if they're really making moves in this direction, I think that could be a good thing. I just don't see how we're going to really capitalize on what the openness part is about until we really have that ability to do those 5 R's. And so far, at least, the publishers aren't there yet.
I've had education faculty say, we already know that what matters is how we use the resources, not so much what the resources are. So I think that's a fertile area for conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And part of what my colleague Nancy O'Neill is the one that's doing her doctorate. We were just talking yesterday, you know, I think a lot of this is going to hinge around faculty beliefs too about, you know, what their responsibilities are with respect to content delivery versus student-centered kind of pedagogy. I think she's going to see a lot of variety in terms of the way, with respect to the way they're using OER based on where their beliefs are currently.
That's great. So we are at the end of our time together. I'm going to ask for one weird thing. If everybody could come off mute and give a round of applause for MJ, I think that would be fabulous because we just
nice. Oh, that's nice. What a great idea. Thanks, Deb.
Yay.
That's nice. I'm very much I'm an auditory person. I know we're not supposed to care about learning styles anymore, but you know, for me, having that auditory feedback is great. That was a good idea.
Wonderful.
Nice
well, thank you, MJ, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in, and thank you so much for leaving me with 2 boxes of pastries here. So,
you can mail them to Maryland. I'll eat some.
I could do that. So thank you. I hope everybody's been inspired by this. I hope you've got a better understanding of, and I'll send them to you in Brazil.
There you go.
Terezinha, I didn't know we had somebody in Brazil. That's awesome. Hi, Brazil. I'm very excited about that. That's wonderful. So thank you all. I hope this helps you, has given you something to think about, something to chew on. And thank you all for tuning in. And MJ, I hope to see you. Will I see you in Baltimore?
Yes, you will.
Okay, I will see you in Baltimore. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Spencer, for hosting. And
thanks, Spencer. This was easy peasy.
Thank you very much, MJ. Thank you, Deb.
All
Thank
right.
you, everybody, for attending.
Thanks all. Bye.